All right, welcome to CBC Next, and I'm here joined with Pastor David Holm again. And last time, if you missed that first one, we were able to talk about Daniel chapter 1. And today we're going to follow, once again, what we talked about on Sunday with Daniel chapter 3. So what stood out to you, Pastor David, about Daniel chapter 3?
Okay, well, it's a great chapter, and one of the things that really stuck out to me was the idea that these three guys, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, were proactive.
Right.
They made a decision a long time ago, before the statue was built, before the king's command was given, a long time ago, that they would not bow down to any other god, that they would trust God's sovereign purpose, and they would trust God's power to deliver them in whatever situation they found themselves in. And so, when I think about us, I think it's important for us to have our minds made up. I mean,
Right.
we're believers in Christ, and if we study and if we try to live for Him and we try to be obedient, then we really, sometimes it's too late when the situation arises if we haven't considered in advance how we were
Right.
going to respond in that particular situation. So one of the things that came to mind was 1 Peter 1:13. And Peter, among other things, says that we're to be preparing our minds for action. And I found that the more literal translation means girding the loins of your mind. And I thought, well, that's really interesting. I want to find out what that means. So some commentaries that I looked at, there was a custom in the Bible where
Right, yeah.
when people were going to work or they're going to run or walk or whatever, they would lift up these garments and tie them around so
Right.
they would trip over them.
Yeah.
So really what I think Peter's telling us here is that when you gird your minds, basically, it's to gather those loose ends of things in your mind so that you're not going to trip up on them when the time comes.
Right. Yeah, I grew up, I'm born in 1985, but teenage years through 98 to, 2010 or something like that. So if you'll remember, baggy pants were a
Yes.
big thing back then.
Yes.
And I remember having to pull up my pants to run and play basketball or whatever.
Yes.
I'm glad that trend has gone away.
Well,
But in a way, we were preparing and girding our loins to do what's next. So some of the most successful people in the world I've heard talk about pre-deciding.
right.
Mark Zuckerberg and some of these other people will only wear one set of clothes. They want all of their decision-making power going. I think it's probably overkill.
Yeah.
But there is something to that, to pre-decide what we're going to do
Sure.
before we get to that point.
Exactly.
I had someone describe it. I heard him say it one time, where you're not going to wait till you get up in the plane to see whether you have a parachute on, right? And you're not going to jump out and then want to check that everything's okay. And I think we often are in those positions where we're playing catch up when we get in a circumstance, or we have something that's, come up. Like as a teenage boy, I remember youth pastors and that said, don't wait till you're in the back seat with a girl.
Yes, exactly.
To decide what you're going to do in those type of
right.
positions. So I think that's great. Yeah.
Yeah, kids are going to have, temptations, drugs, alcohol, all kinds of things.
Right.
And adults even,
Yeah.
I mean, if you're in business, you're going to have temptations to cheat or to cut corners here and there. And so if you wait till that, like you said, you're in the backseat, that situation is right there,
Right.
and you haven't decided, then it really puts you in a bind, and your chances of making the wrong decision
Right.
are greater in those circumstances.
Absolutely. What else you got?
Well, I realized that this is the last time in the book of Daniel that we see Shadrach, Meshach,
Oh,
and
yeah.
Abednego.
That's true. Right.
And so, I was thinking, man, what a way to go out. I mean,
Right, yeah.
if you're not going to be mentioned again, what a
Right.
great story to be remembered for. The idea that they had this unwavering faith and obedience, even if it cost them their lives,
Right.
that they were willing to do that. And, I believe you talked about this a little bit more in your sermon, but, they had no doubt in God's power to save them.
Right.
But the fact is, the way God was going to work in that situation was unknown to them at
Sure.
the time. But still, whatever God decided to do, they were okay with that. And what that brought to my mind was the New Testament passage where Paul says, "For me to live is Christ,
Right.
and to die is gain." And the idea, if I live, well, there's Jesus. If I die, there's more Jesus.
Yeah.
That type of thing. And so you also kind of alluded, I think, to the fact that the God did not deliver them from the fire, but He was present with them in the fire,
Right.
and He brought them out of the fire. And I thought about that key word there is out.
Right.
That our job is to be faithful and to be obedient. And if we trust God and that He's going to take care of us, it may not be in the way that we thought, but He will be with us in that trouble, and He will bring us out of it. And if it's through death, well, that's okay.
Yeah.
Because we're believers in Christ. And there's really nothing that can happen to us physically as believers that can affect our eternity.
Right. Yeah.
And I think that's a way to look at situations where, when you think, well, this could happen to me. And you look at even people around the world,
Right.
Christians who are really persecuted.
Absolutely.
Much,
Right.
on a daily basis and face death.
Right.
And for them to have that attitude that I'm going to be faithful, I'm going to proclaim Christ, even if it costs me my life, because I win either way. There's nothing these people can do.
It's I'm sure you've read through some of the Fox's Book of Martyrs. If you heard of it,
yes.
And there's some other books that I've years ago read through, but it's so amazing to look at these stories and see that faith. Right. And I think if we're honest with ourselves, we don't have any idea what that type of faith looks like. And we could say, I'll stand and I won't do it, but and maybe we would, but we don't know. Yeah.
Well, this story about Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, when I was a kid, I heard it in Sunday school, and it was on a flannel graph board, and the teacher, and it was a great story, and you learned it, but and I'm not sure you would at that age anyway, but it never occurred to me even later to try to put myself in their shoes at that time.
Yeah.
And you think, well, if I was there, I'd be terrified. But again, back to the being prepared and proactive.
Right.
If you have done all of that beforehand, then there's no reason for us to fear.
Absolutely.
Like that.
And this is you made a joke when I talked to you on Sunday about I've never read through this story today before, and sometimes my mind's somewhere else, and that went right over my head. I was like, oh wow, okay, I'm glad you're finally getting around to it. But it is sometimes the familiarity of some of these stories actually kind of hinders us in ways to put ourselves in these positions and to really try and picture what it might be like to live them, because these are real people and real lessons for us to learn.
Exactly. There was one. Actually, it's a piece of music that the choir used to sing years ago. It was actually a paraphrase of Isaiah 43. Craig Courtney paraphrased it, and he says, "Be not afraid, for I have redeemed you. Be not afraid, I have called you by name. When you pass through the waters, I will be with you. When you pass through the flood, it will not sweep over you. And when you walk through the fire, you will not be consumed. You are mine, and you are precious in my sight." And I just love that passage.
Yeah. Because
it's just so comforting to know that no matter what we face, we can be obedient and faithful because God's got us.
Absolutely, yeah. And that's one of those type of lessons and thoughts that you really got to bathe your mind in over and over and over again when you're in the middle of those situations, because it's like, waves sometimes where things crash over you. You lose a loved one and, or go through a diagnosis, or to remind yourself over and over again. And that was what was cool. I'd never really thought about that before when thinking about the Hebrew young men praying the Shema prayer every day, twice a day. The Lord our God is one.
Right.
I love the Lord your God with your heart, your mind, your soul, and really to center yourself on God's in control, and He knows where I'm at, and He's got this.
Exactly.
And like you said, to pre-decide before, when I wake up, okay, God's got this. He's big enough, and whether something huge happens today or not, I'm going to try and come back to this touch point and this, lodestone that God is in control.
He is.
Yeah.
And it's funny, I find myself reading these passages when I'm in trouble. Right. I only read them when I'm in trouble and everything. But really, I think if I read them more on a regular basis, it would strengthen my faith.
Right.
And when you came to those times in your lives, having trouble, you'd be prepared.
Well, thank you so much. This is once
thanks for having
again
me.
really cool. I love hearing the things that stick out to other people,
Yeah.
and I'm sure the church has been helped by it. I heard one life group has been using these
Yeah, someone
because they're
told me
going
that.
through the Book of Daniel as well,
Yeah.
and so I'm sure they're coming up with all kinds of great lessons from these passages in Daniel, and we look forward to continuing
Sure.
to dive into it. If you're bored of the theme, hold on, because the theme goes all the way through, and God is in control. The Most High rules in the kingdom of man. But really, honestly, it's a lesson that we need every
Yeah.
single. It's great to start off the week
Oh, yeah.
with these lessons. So thank you once again for
Thank
being
you
with
very
us,
much. I
and
enjoyed it.
we hope you enjoyed it and are reminded at the very least of what we talked about on Sunday, and really dig that deeper down into your heart and hold on to these truths. We love you so much, church. We'll see you later.